People often think tigers are mean and scary, but the little tiger cub Atwood found in the forest was so hurt that it couldn't harm anyone. After a long time, Atwood believed the tiger had forgotten him. But when they saw each other again, the tiger's response surprised him a lot. Atwood was a simple man who didn't have much money. He lived alone in a village up in the mountains, and he didn't have a big family living with him. He didn't get a chance to go to a fancy school, but he was really clever and kind. He never said no to a tough job. So when he was asked to be a forest ranger, he agreed without thinking twice because the job was just right for him. He had been in the mountains all his life and knew them really well. Every 2 days, Atwood would take a walk in the forest and write down what he saw for his team of rangers. One winter morning, while he was doing his usual check, something very important happened. The forest was all covered in thick snow, and it looked very different from usual. Because he was wearing heavy gear for the mountains, he had to stop often to catch his breath because walking in deep snow was really hard. During one of these breaks, he heard faint crying sounds that seemed very close to him. He stopped and tried to find where the sounds were coming from, but whenever he moved even a little bit, the crying stopped. Atwood thought maybe he was imagining things and hearing stuff that wasn't there. Just when he was about to start walking again, he heard the crying once more. This time, he found it coming from a bush in front of him. He carefully went over to the sound and saw a small tiger cub with its head poking out of the snow. The little tiger was crying and trying to shake off the snow on its head. Atwood looked at it closely and saw that it had painful bite marks on its body and a broken leg. Without wasting any time, he picked up the cub and held it close to his chest. Then he rushed down the mountain and went back to the village until he reached his home. Atwood made a tiny bed for the cub out of his old clothes and found medicinal herbs to help stop the bleeding. Then he gathered some sticks from the garden and tied them to its broken leg for support. The cub whined, but let him apply some more herbs to its wounds. It had already been a long day, but even as dinner time approached, Atwood couldn't think about anything other than the baby tiger in his home. He thought it must be hungry, but he wasn't sure what to feed it. Suddenly, he remembered that his dog had recently given birth and had a fresh supply of milk. Atwood was able to gather some of it into a bowl and brought it back to the tiny tiger cub, hoping it would be enough for it to survive the night. The tiger was tired and aching, but seemed to be interested in the milk. Atwood held the bowl close to its mouth, and it slowly began to lick up the milk with its tongue. The ranger thought that was a good sign. Beings who are close to death don't usually feel hungry, so he hoped this would mean the cub would hang on. Atwood continued to devote his days to looking after the baby tiger. He kept feeding it the dog's milk, and with each day, the cub became stronger and bigger. In time, its injuries healed, but it was left with a long scar on its leg. When he realized that it had become some sort of pet, Atwood decided to name it Roar. After 6 months, the frail cub had grown into a majestic tiger, and Roar would often accompany Atwood on his patrols throughout the mountain. It was during these walks that Atwood noticed how Roar would frolic and play in the grass like a huge house cat. The ranger was glad that Roar was happy, yet he couldn't help but notice that Roar didn't behave like a typical tiger. For this reason, Atwood came to the difficult decision to release Roar into the wilderness. He brought Roar up to the mountain and said goodbye. But when he started to walk away, the tiger followed him, as it had done for the past 6 months. Atwood didn't know how to make Roar stay in the mountain. He tried yelling and shouting, and his plans seemed to work. Roar had never seen Atwood angry before. Frightened, the tiger ran off into the forest, and his human friend went back to the village with tears in his eyes. Atwood continued to patrol the mountain, but didn't see Roar for a long time. It was during one of his daily walks that his life changed forever. The ranger fainted on his trail and was found by a local villager named Charlotte, who at the time was chopping firewood in the mountains. Charlotte helped Atwood, and from that day forward, they became inseparable. After a few weeks, she told him that she felt something more than just friendly affection for him and wanted to become his girlfriend. He was more than happy to be her boyfriend, and 2 years later, he obtained an even better title when he became her husband. At almost 50, he even had a daughter of his own. During one of his usual walks, however, Atwood felt a tingling pain in his waist and fainted again. Luckily, Charlotte was there and able to help him one more time. It took them 3 hours to reach a nearby road, but then a passing car helped them get to the hospital. The doctor found that Atwood's right kidney was shrinking, and his left kidney was becoming necrotic. The ranger stayed in the hospital for a few days, but he didn't want to have an operation because it cost a lot of money. When he came back home, Atwood continued his usual job of checking the mountain. But 3 years later, he got sick again, and this time, his kidneys were in even worse shape. Atwood still didn't want the surgery, but he promised he would take more breaks during his walks in the forest. In the next summer, he was patrolling the mountain again when he saw smoke rising from it. There were big fires in the area, and the ranger knew something was wrong. The fires spread quickly and came very close to Atwood. He tried to run down the mountain as fast as he could, but he was very weak from his illness, and he tripped and fell. Suddenly, a tiger appeared in front of him. Atwood didn't know what to do. The fire was behind him and getting closer by the second, and now there was a tiger in front of him, blocking his path. Atwood closed his eyes and decided to accept his fate, but what the tiger did next shocked him. When it opened its mouth, it went for his clothes instead of his flesh and started dragging him away from the flames. Dumbfounded, Atwood started crawling behind the tiger down the mountain. He was close to safety when a burning branch fell from a tree and pinned him to the ground. The tiger suffered burns as well, but didn't leave his side. Instead, it searched the ground for something and came back with a big stick. What was he supposed to do with that? He thought. Suddenly, it dawned upon him that the tiger wanted to use the stick as a lever to free himself from the tree. He managed to slither away from the branch and resumed his race down the mountain. He was very confused by the tiger's behavior, but that wasn't the right moment to question its intentions. The beast led him home, and when it was sure the human was safe and sound, it affectionately rubbed its body against his legs. That movement snapped Atwood back to reality. He had thought he was dreaming, but now he recognized his old friend Roar. Although grown and bigger, the tiger still had a long scar on his leg from the time it had broken it. Poor Atwood looked at the tiger and asked it out loud if it was Roar. When it heard its name, the tiger looked at him and made a long, happy roar. But after a little while, the tiger went back to the mountains. Atwood really wanted his old friend to stay with him a bit longer, but the tiger knew it belonged in the wild. Charlotte found her husband outside their home and was so thankful he was okay. But Edward told her a surprising story. He told her how a tiger had saved him. He explained how he had rescued the tiger when it was a baby and that now his old friend had saved him from danger. Edward would never forget his tiger friend, and he believed the tiger would always remember him too. What do you think of this story? Let us know in the comments section. Thank you.